What is the meaning of life? Well, if you actually think about it, there are lots of questions, in my opinion, that we ask ourselves, or we ask in general, that I consider to be impertinent or stupid. These are questions that we shouldn't really be asking simply because it is way beyond any rational method by which we could find an answer for. Think questions like, they actually, I believe, prove our intellectual immaturity in believing that we could, first of all, ask these questions and then that we might find the answers. And even if we didn't find them, that we would be capable of understanding the answer if a higher being could offer it to us. That's totally ridiculous for a monkey that was leopard food about a blink of an eye ago. I think that comes from what I consider to be Aristotelian way of thinking, like Aristotle used to think, in that once we run out of questions, then our knowledge is complete. Whether there's science, in my opinion, should be the Socratic way of looking at problems, in that, as Socrates said, the more I learn, the more I understand that I know nothing. In other words, I don't think he was making it up, because I feel the same, and so should you perhaps once you look at it, is that the more you look at things, the more complicated they become. There are too many connections, and there are too many things that simply don't make sense, and that the questions become bigger and bigger rather than we getting any concrete solutions for them. So it shows our intellectual immaturity. Questions like, does God exist? Or what is God's purpose for humans? What is the purpose of the universe? How big is it? All these crazy things don't make any sense. But having said all of those things, I believe that the question, what is the meaning of life, is not one of those. I don't believe that to be an impertinent question. Why? Because we are life. We are the only life form that we know of in this universe. A fragment of DNA. DNA is the organism. If you've looked at the things, you'll see that DNA is the life form and we just a leaf on the tree of life. But in any case, because we are sentient conscious beings now, probably the most advanced fragment of DNA in terms of conscious selection, which is something that will come up later on. That is why we're such an important fragment of DNA, is because we are the only beings that are capable of making selections that go against the electronic slope, because everything else is irresistible. Like I've said in many videos, everything goes down the electron slope, all to do with chemical bonding. But conscious selection is the only time in the universe when we can go against that selection. But in any case, that'll come later in another video. But because we are life and we are the only form of life, then this question can only be answered by us, and it will be what we say it is, because it is our choice. We are the only life form. There's nothing else that we know of. And so what is it? What is the purpose of this life? Just to digress a little bit, objectivity for a human being or a human mind is impossible, in the sense that our minds have not evolved to be objective, to be truthful, or even to be intellectual or just or fair. It has evolved for maximum survivability. That's why it's so damn difficult to get a society with the laws that everybody can accept them, because we're very fluid and we're very circumstance dependent on what we consider to be right and wrong, because our genes really rule us, and therefore we will make the decision that guarantees our maximum survivability. And we really should see ourselves as these guys here, for example. And this example I use is, say, a colony of ants, and this is their Mr. Big Philosopher, are walking over the keyboard of a computer. And these guys are asking it, oh, by the way, what is this thing here? What do you think he's going to tell them? If you really think about it, he's going to be basically talking about this in terms of, one, the little brain that it has, and secondly, its needs for survivability. It might say, well, we can lay eggs here, or we can live there, or we can do something else, or we can have sex somewhere else, or we can store our foods here. But it will never understand that it's a keyboard of a computer. But more importantly, if you were there and you tried to explain it to him, how would you explain it to him? And I think we are that. This is us. that only we can understand things in the same way that the ant would perceive the keyboard of a computer is our understanding of the universe, because we are limited to our hardware and our survival parameters. And even if a being who has full understanding came to us and explained it to us, I think our relationship would be the ant and the computer expert here. So what is the meaning of life? Well, it's obvious. The meaning of life is to be or to persist, to live. That is the meaning of life. Because, well, are you ready to die? If a lion just walked into your house, what would you do? Would you just go and offer yourself to it? No, you'd run away. If there's a fire, what do? You run away. You run away from danger, and you do everything you can to secure a sexual partner or secure your food. Why? You do this to exist. You live to live. So the quest really is immortality. I know, but for a lot of people, I don't want to live forever and all that business. They're talking nonsense. They're not ready to die, are they? If you offered them death right now, what would they say? Oh, no, not now, later. And that's why we are never ready to die. Have you ever seen old people, I don't know, over 100 years old? They have been sick for 30, 40 years with all manner of things. They have suffered endlessly, and yet still with their rheumatoid claws, they're clinging on to the abyss of life, and they won't let go. Is because we can't. That is our purpose. Our purpose is to be there and to be immortal. So here's the main question. If that is the case, why do people commit suicide then? Well, do you remember what we talked about in the last videos when I discussed the true prong universal motivation? And in it we discovered, why does an amoeba eat and divide? Which is the same question that I can ask you. Why do you eat and have sex? And the answer for you on the amoeba has got to be exactly the same. Why not? Because you have evolved from something like an amoeba. And although they may be slightly different, but the principle of pain and pleasure for you or the amoeba is exactly the same. The amoeba runs towards the food and runs away from threats. And that has got to be the same principle. So without these two, the stick and the carrot, there is no motivation for life. Nothing would happen. So this is the important thing that you have to remember. So as we go, the path to immortality is entirely Dionysian. I repeat, and there we come back again, over and over. We will see this guy over and over again, Nietzsche, that although he was wrong in interpreting the principle of evolution as survival, he was absolutely right in understanding its mechanism by which it evolved, which is entirely Dionysian. He saw it. And the basic fundamental drive for immortality, or the way a living being quests for immortality, is through this min-max thing. Here's the max and here's the min. We maximize pleasure and we minimize pain and suffering. That is the logical path by which life complexes. And it actually programs itself, because I'll repeat it, animals would have existed at one point that when they threw themselves off a cliff and broke their bones, they probably had an orgasm, but they wouldn't have made it through the selection, because, that's a dumb way of trying to live. So the fact that we find apples sweet and eat them doesn't mean that there weren't animals that couldn't eat the apple because it was disgusting to them. So we have been programmed by our genes and by natural selection to maximize pleasure, minimize pain, and that is the path that we take towards immortality, or towards continuing our lives. So suicide in this context is the minimization of pain. Now you see how that is very, very consistent with the quest for immortality, because if immortality is the quest for maximization of pleasure and minimization of pain, then that is very much consistent with seeking immortality. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but what you don't understand is that we are stupid. Life is not stupid. If you don't understand that, what it really means is life only wants quality immortality, not any old crap. That's the whole point. And this is entirely Dionysian. If you understand Nietzsche's philosophy and you understand the god of pleasure, Dionysus, you understand that that's what he is. He wants to have the quality of life, not the quantity. He doesn't care about survival. He just wants the maximization of pleasure. And that is, as you can see, very consistent with seeking immortality. So what we are, unfortunately, if you look at this system, is it comes out clear. We're both psychopaths in that we don't care about anything or anyone else in the pursuit of pleasure and minimization of pain, and we are addicts because it never stops, because as soon as we have pleasure, then we want more pleasure, and then it goes away, because our brains are designed that way so that we can be repeating the good things that give us that prolong our lives and avoid the bad things. So we are born addicts. Everything is a born addict. It's not just you. The amoeba is a born addict. So we are fundamentally flawed and dangerous because of this process, that we are psychopaths and addicts because of the way we seek immortality, and that is all due to our genes, because they want to be passing on. They're using us as blinkered donkeys by giving us a carrot and a stick to do their work. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So let's look at the possible quantum foundations of psychopathy and addiction. Where does this come from? And if we're consistent with what I've been saying about evolution and about the importance that we anchor any discipline in the laws of physics, then we have to go back to the hydrogen atom. This is where everything begins. Now, I know you're going to find this a stretch simply because we're not used to thinking like this, but if we are consistent, if you can agree with me that we are rearrangements of hydrogen atoms, if you have followed these videos, the earlier ones, then just look at these two entities here and see how they feel about each other, right? Double psychopathy, where does it come from? This guy here is a psychopath because it just craves electrons. It doesn't care about anything, it just craves electrons. This guy here is a psychopath because it doesn't give a damn about the proton, it just wants maximum freedom to do whatever it wants, because it is a photon. It travels at the speed of light and it doesn't give a damn about anybody else. And this is a craving. This is just a hunger, basically never satiated, and it doesn't care about anybody else. So we have double psychopathy coming in from our relentless pursuit of perpetual freedom to do whatever the hell it is we want, and perpetual craving that is never satiated. So both of these are what gives us our double psychopathy. And you can see that it, well, to me it makes sense anyway, that it comes right from the origin of our evolution. And we're also doubly addicted. Why are we addicted? Because what does the craving or the hunger, what does it crave for? It craves for freedom. And what does freedom crave for? Is to be free from craving. So craving wants freedom, freedom does not want craving. So in other words, one from the other. That is why that we are addicts. When we have pain, we want the pleasure, and so on. So basically, we want craving for freedom and freedom from craving. Did you see what I mean? Anyway, so are we doomed to failure because of the double mechanism of the world? Well, we can't be, because we have already achieved it in our bodies. Bodies, sorry, there's something missing here. But bodies in our DNA code, because we've already achieved it. That's why we have survived, and that's why we survive still. We eat the right foods and we avoid the dangers because that's already been programmed with us. So if we could have done this irresistibly through chemical pathways, then now that we're conscious, surely we should be able to do it even better. So what we really are is we are symbiotic in our internal congregation or architecture, because our bodies, when we're not cancerous or diseased, all our organs, all our cells work in symbiotic relationships. But we're also addicted and we're psychopaths. So this is a problem. You can see it's almost like a contradiction. But what we really need to be coming back is symbiotic instead of symbiotic, addicted, and psychopaths. But this is where, again, I'll go back to Confucius, who said the following, that at the age of 70 I can live my heart's desire and never transgress that which is right, which essentially translates as saying, screw my genes. I will rewire my mind to such an extent that what I consider to be right will be the things that give me pleasure. Remember, we have already done it through the rewiring of our mechanisms stored in our DNA by irresistible methods that are coded in the DNA. So, but what is really, despite that, do we really have a realistic chance? If you ask me, I would say no, because one, gravity is so prevalent everywhere. It's so powerful. It's everywhere. Remember, life is a tiny little accident on planet Earth. Everywhere else is just gravity, and eventually it'll catch up to us when the sun goes bananas, or the galaxy collapses, or whatever happens, which it might any moment, because we don't know what is going to happen. So the chances are minute, almost negligible, I would say. But the other problem, not even if everything else was okay, we are fundamentally by our nature toxic and malignant because of acceleration. Now, when you accelerate one event, because we have gravity tattooed or like a tiger strapped to our backs, if we accelerate, the tiger accelerates. You can't accelerate one without accelerating the other. In other words, the more we accelerate our lives, the more we have technologies, the more we have abundance and so on. What we are inadvertently also doing is we are accelerating gravity as well. And when you have acceleration, the probability of accidents goes sky high. So although we may be accelerated, but we are also extremely dangerous as well. So in order to really truly understand that, we'll have to discuss this later, you'll see what I mean, but we are conscious selectors. We're not subject to irresistible selection, although we subjugate our consciousness to satisfying our cravings, which is complete stupidity. But in any way, we need to understand what conscious selection really is and what its limitations are. What do we mean by genetic shortfalls? Why have we become conscious selectors? Is because of our genetic shortfalls, and we've become clever as a result of all this. And clever is not intelligent. Clever is just basically solving problems. Anybody that thinks that intelligence is the ability to solve problems is mistaken, because there are many problems we should have never be solving because we have to be selective in which problems we solve, because some of them are not problems. Some of them, by solving them, we make problems which did not exist before. I'll leave that to you later to judge for yourself, but they're coming in the next videos. But all of these elements that we'll discuss later are malignant in their nature because they come from acceleration. So, criteria for control. One of the things that I think is most important, if you take any system and you ask yourself the question, what does it take for me to completely control that system? Well, the answer is, I think, in three different criteria. You must be able to control its acceleration. You must be able to decelerate it when you want to, and change direction. Those are the three fundamental. If you can think of a fourth one, then please do. But I couldn't. These are the three elements that we must have. And so far, our obsession is acceleration only. Accelerated gratification, and accelerated minimization of pain and suffering, which is what we were programmed to do. So we've accelerated. We don't even know what deceleration is, and we certainly do not want to change direction because that would be too painful. If you think about it, our solution to any problem in the modern world is to consume more. It is never to consume less, or it is never to regress. It is simply inconceivable. And if any politician ever suggests it, he will be strung up. To talk about deceleration or change of direction, he'd be killed. The only thing we want to hear, more acceleration, more technology. And as you can see, that it could be extremely dangerous for us, because we have taken the system in one direction only. Anyway, if you need a complete and systematic explanation of the points raised in here, then please get this book, number 2 by me. It's free of charge as Kindle. I don't want anything from you. My main thing about this was not necessarily to provide you with truths, but to provide you with my analysis of these versus what the establishment believes, because not everything the establishment believes is right, and also the establishment have become huge businesses. And there's something wrong with our education system, because the highest educated people are the ones who have the most power, and they are the ones that cause the most damage. That is not education. That is something seriously wrong. If you have Oxford and Cambridge priding themselves in producing politicians who then go about doing what they're doing to Britain and to the world, then you can see that there's something seriously wrong with this education system. And if we don't challenge it, we become cultists. Unexamined truths are just opinions. Every idiot has them, and it means nothing. At best, it's just an accident. And unexamined life is not a human life. We will be living like animals which are accelerated and unfortunately, I think that's exactly who we are. Animals accelerated. We're not living a human life at all. Thanks.